Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Before we start, can I ask, can you hear my voice?
Yes, Pak.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, now it's already 1 p.m., so I think we can start now. Thank you very much for attending this session on gender and politics. I'm Sirojuddin Arif. I am the head of MA program in political science at UEE, and I'll be the chair for this session. And today we have 4 papers. All of them talk about gender, so somehow they speak one another. All of them talks some issues on the linkages between gender, Islam, and politics. So I believe all the presenters are here. I see Mr. Noory Okthariza, Ms. Saemah, Ms. Asyiqah, and one more, probably Mr. Jafri will come soon. So today we have 4 papers. One is Decolonization of Feminism in the Malayan Nationalist Movements, a case study of Ibn Zain and Samsiah Faqeh, written by Asyiqah Mohamad Jamil and Asilatul Hana Abdullah. Asyiqah Jamil currently is a PhD candidate in the Department of History and Civilization at International Islamic University of Malaysia. And Asilatul Hana Abdullah holds PhD in the same department at the same university. The second paper is entitled Women and Politics, an Islamic Overview, Case Study of Pakistan, is written by Saemah Shamim. She is from Nepal, and currently she is a student at the Political Science program at UEE. And the third paper is written by Qamar, Abbas, Jafri. He holds PhD in Sociology from School of Global, Urban, and Social Studies at RMIT, Australia. And currently, he is working on a book project on peace building in Pakistan. He is also a fellow at COMPOS, or Center of Muslim Politics and World Society at UAE. And finally, we have a paper by Noory Okthariza and Jessica Gillian, List Position and Incumbency Effects, a Systematic Bias of Women's Political Representation in Indonesia. Mr. Okta is a researcher at CSIS Jakarta, while Jessica Gillian is analyst and monitor at Deloitte, London, and former research intern at CSIS. As you have 4 speakers today, 4 papers today, and we have 1 hour and a half. So I think it would be great if one speaker speak for no longer than 15 minutes. I'll give you some, warning. I'll raise twice. One is when you have 5 minutes left, and the last one when you have only 1 minute. So hopefully we can have more time for discussion and session. And for the participants, you can raise your hand in the question and answer session, or you can write your questions in the chat box. So without further ado, let me invite the first paper. Is it presented by Ms. Asyiqah? Okay, let me invite Ms. Asyiqah to present the first paper. The screen is yours, Ms. Asyiqah. Thank you.
Kat mana nak share? Okay. Please, I'm going to share the script first.
Okay.
Can you see?
Yes. Okay, now we can see your PowerPoint.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. Thank you for a brief from our chairman of this session. I'm Asyiqah binti Mohamad Jamil. I'm from IIUM. We'll be discussing a collaborative paper with Dr. Asilatul Hana. Then I will conduct the presenting the paper entitled as Decolonization of Feminism in Malayan Nationalist Movement, a case study of Ibn Zain and Samsiah Faqeh, while Dr. Hana will be handle if you have any Q&A session, you'll be welcome to ask the question after this. Okay. Okay, so this is a content of our discussion today. Includes introduction and the other of contents of the discussion. Okay, we go directly into the introduction. The right and the left Malayan nationalist movement usually highlighted more on one gender rather than fairly discussed on both gender, which are men and women. And it seemed depreciating the women nationalist movement in Malaya. Okay. In the additional Eurocentric fallacy also degrading the value of women, especially among the women in Southeast Asia, as well as regarding Muslim women in Southeast Asia, where the women had been misrepresented and also intimidated by patriarchy of Orientalism narration. Also, the women had been viewed as a vulnerable victim that to be saved from their men had meant them quarry for double oppression. Okay, so this kind of thing will be more, you will get more elaboration after this. Okay, so more unfortunately, the part of the modern feminists still using the same tool of the Eurocentric nation as well as the Eurocentric feminism to come up with the idea of the woman emancipation in the modern time. Okay. Therefore, by highlighting two important figures, which are Zain and Shamsiah Faqeh, would refute the Eurocentric narration over the woman in Malaya, particularly in this case. Okay. So what is the Eurocentric narrative? Okay. So Eurocentric narrative, based on the study, one should analyze the emergence of Orientalist by itself, where the Orientalist is portraying how the Western value or standardize their evaluation throughout the native people, based on socio-political justification upon the imperialism and colonialism. Okay, so what is a Eurocentric narration? It's the statement that always come with a bias statement and cannot compare to the practice of the European themselves, even though they have the same value as the Eastern people, but they tend to be more focused on the problem that happened inside the native people. So they focus on native misogynistic, the oddness of the religious practices, especially in Asia, in the case of Islam, custom and tradition of the native people in the Malay archipelago in this case. Okay. So the Western standard of evaluation could be say as to justify the colonial action, as well as they come into the statement of the native are backwards, uncivilized, and barbaric. Okay. Okay, so we move to the decolonizing colonial Eurocentric narration. Okay, what the cause of the Eurocentric narration happened in our area? First, of course, back to the our statement before, is based on the Eurocentric culture that come out with the Orientalism, narration, where basic of the Orientalist itself is originated from the European culture, with basic of their culture is based on androcentric and also misogynistic of the European society itself. Okay, so they also come up with a basic narration on the oddness view on the Islamic perspective in Muslim world. Okay, as where they got the information based on the poor understanding and unreliable sources, as resulted into the negative narration on the Muslim woman in this particular case. Therefore, the information that get always mistranslate from the Arabic text by clerics or by clergy group, and also the biased narration based on the crusaders and the travelers who are travel or going into the Muslim area. Okay, so because of this, are basically most of the crusaders and the travelers are men, so this side of the men had been implemented into the the view that they given, which they have the limited access to the Muslim women when they visit the area. Okay. So the effect, the immediate effect that we can see throughout the Eurocentric and colonialism itself had been found in 19th century. As the basic for the Eurocentric narration, as the woman of the East, the narration of the condition of the woman is the product of the tale and Eurocentrism carried out by the Orientalists. And it comes to the statement, women are inferior to men. Okay, so they come out with a characterization based on the narration itself. A native women were ignored for the social, educational, and economical rights and value. Okay, therefore, women should depend on the man, deprived by patriarchal and colonial oppression, double subjugation, and colonized being, and submissive object. Okay, so how to decolonize the Eurocentric narration of women in particular Asian region? So first, of course, the using of the local resources is very important regarding women and their involvement in politics, because we want to readdress the awakening of Malay women in this case from social deprivation that bound them into the inferiority of men. Okay, so the narration of the Malay manuscript would be part of the sources that we will use, and then the analysis of the women in the nationalist movement also important in this sense that we want to discuss the condition of the modern woman in the Malay region, in the Asian region, especially in Malay world. Okay, we move to the Malay woman in politics. Okay, so this part is divided into two. First, is divided into the time space. Okay, first, we can see from the feudal era, it has the narration of the Malay woman as having political domination or the political power. Basically, most of the women on the feudal era that have the power came from the noble lineage, which they have the direct involvement in the court palace. Okay, so they also have been given they also have roles to produce an heir, to be an heir themselves, the ambassador and diplomats for political stability between inside the court as well as between the two nations, and also become the king or the sultanah or the leader themselves. As you can see here, I already give the list of the example of the woman who become the direct heir for the sultan itself. It's happened in Patani. They have 4 women queens, 4 women queens in a different era, but they are siblings. Okay, the ambassador or the diplomats is happened in the case of the Tun Fatimah, Tun Kudu, and also Tun Teja. Okay, so another case as the sultanah themselves, the leaders themselves, as had been appointed or had been given the title of Sri Kandi. Okay, for example, this Cik Siti Wan Kembang in the case of leadership in Kelantan. Okay, so all the sources of the all the sources regarding the Malay as to have an authoritarian power should be analysed throughout the Malay scriptures, Malay manuscripts, many Malay manuscript at Sulatus Salatin, Bustanus Salatin, Tufah An-Nafis, Hikayat Siak, ringkasan cerita Kelantan, and many more. Not only limited into the things that I list here.
5 minutes more, Ms. Asyiqah.
Okay, our discussion. Okay, the figures of our discussion is from the right wing of the nationalists, which with the carrier status of the elite, from the elite family. She's her early career as the teachers had carrying her as to be considered as the pioneer in women education and women leadership. So from here you can see her career and also what she's doing throughout the career as the teacher and also as the politician. We start with the Association of Ibu Sepakat, where the association had been joint ventured with the leadership of UMNO, which namely as the women wing of the UMNO. So after that, he became the assemblywoman in 1960 and appointed as a representative of the South Pontian constituency in 1961. Apart from the political development that carried out by the Ibu Zain, she also entitled as the author herself by writing in Bulan Melayu magazine and also writing 2 books, Konsep Kepribadian and Kesatuan Wanita Melayu, as the testament of the Malay women's feminism that operates differently from what the West think, and the preservation of the culture of the Malay people and also the practice of Islam as the main, as the whole practices that happen inside the Malay world. Okay, next we go to the left-wing woman nationalist that Samsiah Faqeh. Her social structure that we can see here, she's coming from the commoner family, with regard of the a lot of the turbulences that happened inside her arranged marriage, and she got divorced for 4 times. So comparing to the Ibu Zain, the life of Samsiah Faqeh is not really go smoothly like Ibu Zain, because she's coming from the elite family, got a good career and also smoothly going directly into the political arena. So Samsiah got the exposure into the political arena by the influence of Indonesian nationalism that inspired also by religious speech and UMNO influences. However, she cannot go directly to the woman into the UMNO because of her status as a communist. Okay, so as long as the time passed, she joined PKMM, Persatuan Melayu Malaya, between 1945 to 1946, and had been given a trust to lead the women wings called Awas, or in English we call as the League of Aware Women. And she was known by her firm leadership and the fiery speech. Okay, so she was known by the good sermon, the good female sermon. Okay, and then as time passed, she joined PKM, Persatuan Parti Komunis Malaya, under the wing of the 10th Regiment. 10th Regiment is a specialized Malay insurgents that created by the PKM itself, where the struggle of her become changed into the armed struggle, and she was highly supported by Awas previously that created under the PKMM, and then her contribution has led Awas by propagating the importance of women in national liberation and also increasing the support of women for PKMM. Okay, so basically, as the conclusion for the Samsiah struggle, she said that the struggle for liberation should be prioritized as crucial step to endorse the woman emancipation, though the woman is the emancipation that she want to fight had not been ignored. Okay, so last for the conclusion. The women's role in the national movement had given a significant impact on the struggle regarding the liberation of Malaya. Though the political or within the nationalist movement has allowed them to articulate the women's right together with the national liberation, and at the same time has increasing the support from the masses. So this kind of option has given them a serampang domata, or we call it in double-edged sword for the women, as long as they can participate with the significant roles in politics and also fight for the women emancipation or women's right. Okay, so from the action shown by Ibu Zain and also from the Samsiah Faqeh had shown or had manifested the brave and the strong Malay woman who cannot contemplate as a weak and undermined under the colonial patriarchal point of view. Okay, before I finish the conclusion, finish the slide, this is the resources that we use for the paper. And then okay, there's the say of the Malay and the global saying that the hand that swings the cradle can shake the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Asyiqah, for your very interesting and inspiring presentation. It's very interesting to see, to listen and study the history of women political struggle in the past. And now we move to the second speaker, Ms. Saemah Shamim. We'll talk about women and politics in Pakistan. The screen is yours, Saemah.
Prof, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, all right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hello, everyone. I'm Saemah from the Faculty of Social Science. All right. So without wasting time, I would like to just begin. Let me share the screen. All right, so my paper talks about women and politics and Islamic overview. I have specified my case study with the case study of Pakistan. Why I chose Pakistan is because Pakistan is known as the Republic of Islamic State. So basically, this paper aims to explore and emphasize the female empowerment, political involvement, and historical review of the role of female participation in Islam, with a focus on the adoption and realistic touches of Pakistani women politicians. So in order to achieve the said objectives, we must evaluate the requirements of both male and female from each of their perspectives. We can't only think about women's need from a male point of view or vice versa, because maybe that would end up giving us a very biased result. So when I say that, I do not consider that men and women are the same thing in this context. Rather, we must consider that they both have their own possibilities and responsibilities with regard that they were born as men and women. So where is the problem? The problem is when Muslim women, they strive themselves to establish, they are faced with several obstacles, both internal and external, some from the Muslim society itself due to lack of proper education about Muslim women's freedom, rights, social responsibilities, and contribution to the society, and also from the women themselves because of their limited knowledge in respect to socio-political course of actions and strategies, make them a lost cause in politics. Women, they themselves don't know what responsibilities and rights they have. So, and the last but not the least, it is from the widespread Western political philosophies and culture, which largely influences today's youth. So there are millions of different interpretations. And if you compare the Western political philosophies and Islamic perspective of politics, we can see many contradictory arguments in them. So in Pakistan political context, women are not an uncommon situation, even though that women have played a significant role in Pakistani politics if we go through the history of Pakistan, and they have offered leadership on occasion, their level of participation has remained insufficient and unsatisfactory. So to do this research, I have basically was dependent on secondary source because enough data were found to undertake this investigation. So as a result, I did not feel any need to go through the data from the primary sources. So scholarly books, journals, newspapers, reports, etc. They were the source of my study. Well, so dipping down into the major context is that what is the Islamic perspective about women in politics? So what Islam says about women in politics. So women were deeply involved socially and politically both during the time of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Muslim women, they started contributing to the society from the very first era of Islam. Not only they defended the religion against the violent opposition from both their own families and society, but they also shared the responsibilities for the reformation of the society as well. So women, like men, they equally contributed in the reformation of the new era of Islam within their homes and also in the society. So they were granted the right to vote in the election of their leaders through bay'ah. So actually bay'ah is a method through which men and women, they vote and support their leader of their state. So women, like males, they have always supported and pledged devotion to the governmental system that was established under the leadership of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the proof can also be taken from Surah An-Nisa, where there is the ayah that talks about the bay'ah of Muslim women taking the bay'ah. So what I would like to say is that we must not forget that humans were not designed for solitude and indestructible uniqueness according to Islam. They are designed to foster community, relationship, and conversation. This means that in Muslim culture, each person, either men or women, is seen as a part of a community of believers with rights as a whole unit rather than an autonomous individual, and each one of them has their own responsibilities and rights to fulfill. So when Islam has already given a positive perspective for the women participation in Islam, what factors actually contribute to women lack of political participation, especially in Islamic state, such as Pakistan? So despite the above mentioned perspectives of Islam over the course of time, due to the gradual spread of un-Islamic political culture and atmosphere, I would like to highlight this, the un-Islamic political culture and atmosphere. The participation of Muslim women is not encouraged even by the Muslim societies, and therefore their involvement went on decreasing. So what is the real scenario? Well, the world strived hard to implement women political participation, may it be in Islamic or non-Islamic state. Why this comparison? Because so that we cannot say that Islam is the reason that pushes women behind, but both the Islamic and non-Islamic state, they both have strived hard to implement the women political participation. For an example, at least there were 19 nations, including even the US, initially restricted the right to vote for women of certain backgrounds based on demographic factors such as age, race, education level, and marital status. So sometimes decades were passed before all citizens were allowed to vote. In US, for an example, more than 4 decades passed between the ratification of the 19th Amendment and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Even in Australia, Indigenous women were not allowed until 1962, 6 decades after non-Indigenous women were able to vote. Similarly, in South Africa, more than 60 years passed between when white women won voting rights in 1930 and when Black women won them in 1993. So even in India, in 1935, only those who were married to a male voter or possessed a specific literacy qualification were allowed to vote. And there are even some countries who initially set a higher minimum age for women voters than for their male counterparts in 1915. For an example, we can take Icelandic women over age 40 gained the right to vote. 5 years later, the voting age for women was lowered to 25 in the line with the requirement for men. So, although the Declaration of Independence...
5 minutes more, Zain.
Yes?
5 minutes more.
All right. So it specifies that all men are created equally. It took decades and movement to grant women right to vote around the world. So, and if you look what is the presentation of women in Pakistan, Pakistani women, they were granted the right for political participation in 1947, and that was again was reconfirmed in 1956. But this political zeal did not transfer into effective political participation. So although there was a constitutional right, millions of women have been banned from voting. What was the reason? Because of the political parties, the agreements among the political parties, local elders, and powerful figures citing customs and traditions as an excuse. So even if they may not be prevented from voting by their male relatives, they were actually raised to not pay attention to the election, as if it is not the concern of women but only male. And then of course there are who state that female participation in election is forbidden, it is haram. That is the wrong interpretations of some ayat and ahadith of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So if we see the recent era, because of the literacy rate has increased compared to the history, the Pakistani Election Commission has now been given the authority to declare results invalid if the female voters make a fewer than 10% of the electorate. And I think this is a very important step toward increasing women's political participation. And due to this act implementation, Pakistan's election commission cancelled a by-election in Lower Dir in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in 2018 due to low female voter turnout. So female voters cast over 1,000 votes in the re-election. This is an important start that will lead to further positive outcomes in near future. So therefore, the data shows that the positive approach towards women participation worldwide, though it be Islamic State or non-Islamic state. So this comparison of worldview and the Islamic State of Pakistan exhibit that the stereotype and so-called culture, the man-made culture, is the result of women discrimination, either politically and socially, and also the un-Islamic political culture that exists now. So what exactly are the challenges? So Pakistani society is founded on patriarchal standard and man-made culture. That is one of the challenges, and it contributes in rising the gender disparities in several areas of life, and also the failure in the execution of legal procedures, insufficient assistance from law enforcement agencies and the court, and socio-economic barriers to women's political empowerment. They all contribute to violence. However, I believe that this perception is still debatable, as there are many who says otherwise. So according to me, this issue still needs more research from an Islamic point of view. So the thought still requires more study and continues to remain a topic of research. So as a suggestion, I would say that women education shouldn't be ignored, but men education is needed to be brought under focus. Women education seems to be a very old slogan, and now men education should be focused on. Educating men is another integral part of elucidation of situation. Men must be made conscious of the status of women and their rights, and vice versa, because educating men is important to eliminate the patriarchy from the society, aware men about women's development and also about the true perspective of Islam towards women is more likely to be successful in this regard. Because of this, even the educated women, they are not being able to step forward because of this patriarchal culture. So as a concluding, I will say that women are increasingly involved in politics as voters, candidates, and political activists, but this has not resulted in the development of female rights to satisfactory extent. And people say that what is the use of these small efforts? They cannot see that we must lay one brick at a time. A pebble cast into a pond causes multiple that is spread in all directions. Each one of thoughts, words, and deeds is similar. No one has the right to sit down and feel hopeless. There is too much work to do, and everyone is responsible for that. So we have come this far. A little more effort requires to bring in equity into actions. But yeah, we must not forget that pre-Islamic Islamic era was full of pity and atrocities in the context of women, as they were deprived of even the smallest of basic and fundamental rights. It is only Islam that not only recognized the individual identity of women, but also enforced all of their rights. The modern human rights, including the women rights, were instigated by the previous rights and status provided by Islam about 1400 years ago. So it was back before. So, well, as my final sentence, I would like to say that there will never be a new world order until women are a part of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Saemah, for your very informative discussion and presentation on the women's political role in Pakistan. And fortunately, we have another discussion by Qamar Jafri, who also talks about women and politics in Pakistan. So it will be very interesting. So without further ado, I'll invite Qamar Jafri. And as a general reminder, Qamar, you will have 15 minutes to deliver your presentation. I'll give you some time after 10 minutes. Okay, the screen is yours, Qamar.
Hello, everyone. Can you listen me?
Yes, we can hear you, Qamar.
Yes, thank you so much. Sorry for the late. I was looking for my slide. So I will extend the women political participation in Pakistan by Samsiah towards women, religion, and gender identity formation and the contentions of women identity formation in Pakistan. So before that, I will introduce myself. My name is Qamar Jafri. I am a recent graduate in PhD in sociology from RMIT University, Australia. I'm also the composed writing fellow of UII currently. So my topic focuses on religion, society, and gender identity. The particular focus of my this research or presentation is on women's online activism and how that activism is creating the political contention in Pakistan. The context to this, my argument to this is the Muslim majority societies, including Pakistan, there has been a political debate with the Western white Christian societies since post-colonial periods or during the colonial periods. That contention between the Western and the Muslim societies has led to the intergroup conflict and political confrontation in relation to the construction of gender identity and role of gender in politics and the public space in Muslim societies or Islamic world. In that context, my argument goes to the recent emergence of women protests and women marches and women activism in Pakistan. That activism was previously existing in Pakistan, but the new media triggered this through Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. That give more voice to them, to the women, whether they are pro-Western or they are anti-feminist. So, for example, in March 2018, the Women March was organized in different cities of Pakistan on the day of International Women Day. Social media at that time played a very important and significant role that helped them to organize, plan, and wage the March for Women Rights and Women Space in Pakistani society. That gender-based political contention and activism was mainly transferred towards Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, where photos, posters, messages, and different debates about the role, about the identity, about the space, about the importance of women rights and women's existence in Islamic society like Pakistan should be. That West-oriented feminist activists and the religious patriarchal groups were most of the time in contention or were in face-to-face. That contention between the both groups led to different courses. That courses were debated on social media. Whether what kind of identity of gender should be, whether there should be West oriented or the Islam oriented. And my presentation goes to further that to analyze this discourse of traditionalist or the religious patriarchy of Pakistan and the West-oriented feminist through the lens of group threat theory. I propose that group threat theory will be helpful in analyzing these the perceived group threats of these two groups, like traditionalists and non-traditionalists. This theory states that there are four group threats, like realistic, symbolic, intergroup, and negative stereotypes. I will explain further this concept and my conclusions by analyzing my data and next slides. So how
Can you show
they are
your
used?
slide, Qamar?
Yes. Yes, can you listen me?
Yes, I can listen you, but if you think that you presenting a slide, actually we don't see the slide.
Oh, I'm presenting slides. You are not looking at slides.
If you are thinking that you are presenting the slide, actually we don't see the slide. But if you go without slide, that's fine.
I shared my slides. Now you can see.
Yeah, now we can see the slide.
Oh,
Thank you,
I'm sorry.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry for that.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you.
I was thinking I have shared. So I will quickly go to my slides, which I presented. So I come to the point here, how they are using social media for gender identity and women rights in Pakistan. Activists of first I will discuss who are the actors in this activism for gender rights. The two groups, traditionalists and non-traditionalists. Traditionalists include the right-wing religious groups, political factions, and madrasa students, graduates, and right-wing media. And the non-traditionalists include left-wing political factions, media, civil society, NGOs, and students. And most of the non-traditionalists are West-oriented feminists, while the traditionalists are from Islamic perspective oriented groups. How they are using social media to mobilize the people for women rights and activism. They are using Facebook pages, Facebook groups, Twitter hashtags, videos on YouTube. The examples of these pages and groups include Liberal Pakistan, Feminism Pakistan, Anti-Feminism Pakistan, Stop Feminism, Aurat March Islamabad, like this. These are the different pages and groups that are used on social media uh, by the both groups. For example, here when I search the data for my this research, I put anti-feminism Pakistan on Facebook search, and I found these pages: Liberal Pakistan, Feminism Pakistan, and thousands of members of these groups are there. So we can measure the importance and messages from here, what messages they are going to promote: feminism in Pakistan, liberal Pakistan, and feminism beyond religious patriarchy. Though they are using religious patriarchy in Pakistan, feminist. Other side on Twitter, if I write Aurat March in search, I found different Aurat March, different cities of Pakistan, like in Lahore city, Islamabad, Aurat March Islamabad, Aurat March Multan, Aurat March Karachi, Sindh. So this across different cities of Pakistan, they have made different groups with the name of cities, and then they mobilize people in those cities for women rights. Opposite to this are traditionalists. There, when I search anti-feminism, the anti-feminism Pakistan and anti-feminism, stop feminism, like these groups are the traditionalists, and these groups are of non-traditionalist or West-oriented feminists. So, what are their discourses through the use of this social media? Uh, Non-traditionalists give message through their posters, Facebook videos, Facebook uh, speeches on Facebook, pictures or photos, they say "Mera jism meri marzi." So the context of this course, "My body, my choice," goes to the Western concept as this woman freedom. So they ask for the "Mera jism meri marzi," my body, my choice. Like this goes background, like in consent, freedom, and the will of the woman in marriage and seeking education and going into different jobs and employment, doing business. So this discourse goes back to that. They have generated this message. The other discourse is there is no honor in killing. This is anti honor killing, like patriarchal killing of women in the name of honor in Pakistan. And the other discourse is jazz khori band karo. That is the custom of dowry at the time of marriage. That is common in South Asian society, including India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. So they are generating this discourse against the patriarchal uh, concepts of dowry. औरत बच्चा पैदा करने की machine नहीं है. Woman is not a machine to produce a child. So here is also the concept of woman freedom regarding the family planning. Like woman is not bound to a family or bound to decide on the will of man, whether she want to produce children, she want to give birth to children or not. So that is also
five more minutes, Qamar.
That's okay, that's fine. So दुपट्टा तुम्हें इतना पसंद है तो खुद पहन लो. If you too much fond of scarf, you are it yourself. This is another discourse like parda. Traditionalists think that they generate the contention against these discourses, like they say, मैं बापर्दा हूँ, I am in veil, मैं घर की मलक हूँ, I am queen of the home. They want to keep the woman in the public and a private role within the home. And bihai na manzoor, we reject the immorality. Though they see if these women are coming outside in the public spaces, they are spreading immorality, they are spreading obscenity, vulgarity like this one. So activists also use social media to organize offline protests, like protests, musical events, women rights walks, lobbying for legislation or lawmaking for women empowerment. Like these are the photos of social media. These are the music or musical events that are held from the historical folk songs. Women are singing in favor of feminism or the non-traditionalist, that they're the historically women in Pakistan or in this South Asia were also feminist. They are giving the message. They are also putting that we don't have the culture of this burqa or this veil in South Asia. This is imposed by the state in the name of religion, in the name of Islam. These burqas or this parda were distributed in the government educational institution. While they contest that we have this kind of dupatta or chadar or parda, we don't have this kind. This is imposed by the traditionalists. This is imposed by the state in the name of Islamization of the society. So in conclusion and contribution of this my research, I revisit the group threat theory which I discussed earlier, that symbolic threats, symbolic threats are felt by the traditionalists to their values, culture, language, and worldview, what they think about the other world. Like they put a message, I am queen of my house. This is that is what is they think about, that women should be inside the home and they should have a private role. They are queen, they are the power holder, decision makers within the home. So the other concept of my theory is realistic threats. On the other side, the realistic threats are felt by religious patriarchy and political elites. When the women will come to public space like feminists do, they will lose power, they will lose control, they will lose privileges that are entitled to women in religious patriarchal society or men-dominated society of Pakistan. So I suppose these are the realistic threats of the traditionalists. On the other side, these threats increase anxiety between traditionalists and non-traditionalists, like they are West-supported feminist groups. When these two groups have anxiety between them, this anxiety creates political contention, political debate, and conflict between these two groups, like traditionalists and non-traditionalists. When they confront each other, they generate negative stereotypes against each other. Those stereotypes can be like "Bihayai na manzoor," we don't accept the obscenity, this is obscenity, this is vulgarity, this is anti-Islam, this is anti-Pakistan. These are the stereotypes that are generated when they have anxiety of group threat anxiety, that is lose of identity. The traditionalists feel they are losing their identity, they are losing their Islamic identity, and in that fear they generate stereotypes, while West-oriented feminists generate and other stereotypes like my body, my choice, like these stereotypes. So this contention has led to the political debate in Pakistan, and my study has contributed two things mainly here. One, the use of social media, how they are using social media. This is a very relatively new approach. And the other theoretical, I proposed group threat theory. They have perceived groups which create the contention or conflict between the West-oriented feminists and the Islamic-oriented patriarchy in Pakistan, including other Muslim societies that also be in other Muslim societies. So for other societies, how other resources, how Pakistani women are involved in non-violent protests and human rights in Pakistan, and how they are using social media to promote peace in Pakistan, and how they are working uh, to prevent sexual violence in Pakistan. My other studies may be helpful if anyone wants to hear. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Qamar, for your very insightful presentation. It is very informative, and I'm glad to see how actually in Pakistan there are some new movement by women in order to develop women interest. Okay, from women feminist issues, now we move to electoral system, and I'll invite Okta to deliver his presentation about how electoral system in Indonesia affects women in the election. The screen is yours, Okta.
Okay. Okay, can you see my slides already?
Yes, we can see your slide.
Okay, thank you, Mas Sirojuddin Arif. Okay, sorry. Okay, very good afternoon to all of you. What I'm going to be presenting in this conference, it's going to be based on a paper that I co-author with Jessica Gillian. She's a former research intern at CSIS, but unfortunately she's not around, so I'll be presenting this alone. We wrote this paper entitled List Position and Incumbency Effects, Systemic Bias of Women Representation in Indonesia. I guess from the title, you can tell that what we trying to do in this paper basically is explaining various factors that might explain the chance of women to get elected in the elections in Indonesia. And we use the case of the 2019 elections, yeah, it's our case study. And basically we argue that these two factors, list position and incumbency status of candidates, are among the most profound factors in determining a candidate's electoral success. And this is the outline of my presentation. I'm going to start with background of the research, a literature review, data and method, descriptive findings, main findings, research implications, and conclusion. Background of the research. Some of you might already know that in the 2019 election, the number of women in Indonesia reached a record high, in which around 21% of current member of parliament in Indonesia are women. So that's translate around 120 out of 570 member of parliament are women. Yeah. And some said that this achievement was partly due to the impact of gender quota, which already been in place in Indonesia since at least the 2004 elections. And as you can see, in 2004 elections, we have around 12% of elected women, an increase by around 3% compared to 1999 elections. And then if you take an average from 2004 up to 2019 elections, on average in Indonesia, we have around 17% of women legislatures. And that 17% actually doubles, yeah, if you compare to the number of women that we have during the New Orders regime in 1971 up to 1997. It was only on average 9% of female legislators. What about Indonesia compared to regional and global perspective? Indonesia did pretty good actually compared to Asian countries average in 2021. We are currently on the same standing here with Asian countries. It stands at around 21%, but Indonesia still below global average, which currently stand around 26%, but far below developed countries in Western Europe, in North America, and in Nordic countries. So still a lot of things to do to achieve that standard. I'm just gonna skip this part. I'm gonna talk a little bit about various versions of gender quota policy. So the 30% of gender quota policy as applies in Indonesia is just one of the versions of this policy. Another version of it is the parity rules of 50-50 for both men and women candidates as applies in France. So the way they do it, they alter the sequence of candidates according to gender. So man, woman, man, woman, man, woman, and so on. That's the parity rule. And then the second one, you have voluntary party quota as applies in Germany, Norway, and Sweden, among many others. So electoral law in these countries will not require party to have certain number of women to be nominated in the ballot, but it will depend. It will be depending on the willingness of political parties, the openness of political parties to nominate women candidates as many as they want. And then the second one, you have incremental quota. So let's say in this year elections, you have 20% quota for women, and then you increase the bar into 25% for the next elections, and then you increase the bar another 5% for another elections. And then the fourth one, you have the standard 30% quota is in Indonesia. This is actually the standard practice you can see around the world. And then the last one, you have reserve seat quota. As applies in Rwanda, Uganda, and Jordan. Yeah. So unlike the other option for this reserve seats policy, it is the only one that deliberately intervene the output of the elections. But for the standard 30% quota as in Indonesia, for example, we intervene the input of the election, but basically we have no say about the output or the outcome of the election. So that's the difference. I guess I'm just gonna skip this part due to time constraint. Moving on to research questions of our paper. So these are two questions that we pose. What factors contribute to women political success in Indonesia? And what are the characteristics of elected women in Indonesia? So the way we approach these questions basically is by testing various theories and hypotheses related to candidates' electoral success. So number one, we assess the impact of list position or name order, the way candidates are listed on the ballot form. Yeah. So many research has shown that those candidates located early on the ballot would tend to have a higher likelihood of getting elected or winning seats. And we're gonna test the extent to which this hypothesis holds within the Indonesian context. And then the second one, we also assess the impact of incumbency status. We define incumbency as candidates who are a former member of a national level parliament or anggota DPR RI, or former member of parliament at various levels at the local level in Indonesia. So be it at provincial or district level parliaments. And then of course, we also assess some other confounding variables that might affect the chance of winning from women candidates. Among others are candidates' occupations, and then party, religion, education, and age. And this is where our data come from. So we use CVs from all candidates running in the 2019 election. Someone from UC Berkeley has been very generous in providing this data for public. So we use this data for our purpose. And then we combine this data with the proportions of Muslim at district and municipality levels from Indonesian census conducted by Indonesian statistical agency. So in total, we got around 7,300 candidates who submitted their CV, and women make up around 2,900 of them, and men make up around 4,400 of them. The dependent variable of this paper is whether or not the candidates are elected or not elected. So we coded 1 if they are elected, and we coded a 0 if they are not elected. So it's a binary variables of electoral outcome. Here is the list of our independent variables. We have candidates list position, and then candidates incumbency status, their occupation, their political parties, their gender, their age, marital status, education level, and the percentage of Muslims. There are some issues that we need to address in this data. Number one, information from many candidates are not completed because not all candidates fill out the required information in the CV form. So that leads to some missing data when we do the analysis. And number two, some candidates, or the majority of candidates, actually, they don't have standardized way in reporting their occupations. So you have hundreds of variations in terms of the way candidates report their jobs, and the way we adjust this problem is by adjusting their occupation based on sectors or types. Before I present to you the main result, I think I need to justify the relationship between list position and electability. There's something called the primacy effect argument, which is a psychological bias towards selecting the first option considered in a set. This is particularly very pronounced in survey-based research and political psychology research. So John Krosnick himself, he is a political psychologist. He said that when respondents were asked a set of questions in a survey-based research that require respondent higher cognitive skills to answer those questions, but at the same time, the respondents know that they're not going to get a clear benefit by answering those questions, then he said respondent would tend to give you satisfying and sufficient responses, rather than giving you an optimum responses to your questions. And Krosnick explained some examples.
5 more minutes, Okta.
Okay. Some examples of the satisfying responses in survey, such as you tend to say don't know when you have the option to do that. And then you tend to agree with survey's assertion. You tend to select the first answer that seems reasonable to you. And then you tend to support status quo. And then the second argument that is also important is what we call the information shortcut. So selecting one option among hundreds of alternatives is a daunting task for voters, especially in Indonesia, in which we adopt the extreme multi-party system. In the 2019 election alone, for instance, there were in total 14 political parties competing in the elections, and each political party could nominate at least, let's say, 10 candidates, and then you multiply that 10 candidates with 14 political parties, you're going to get around 140 candidates, and voters will need to pick just one out of these hundreds of candidates. So it's pretty much a daunting task for them to do that. And then the task would double down when candidates are not well known. Media coverage is rare, and elections is held concurrently with the much visible presidential elections. And this situation would create what we call fatigue voters. So the fatigue voters will need cues and heuristics in order for them to make an informed decisions. I'm going to skip this part. This is the first table about the elected women and their job sectors. So as you can tell, from total 120 elected women, the majority of them are coming from incumbent background, be it those who are member of national parliament from the previous term, and then member of local parliament at provincial and district level, and then some incumbent just didn't specify their level of parliament. And then the second biggest is those who are coming from entrepreneurship background or private sectors, comprising around 27% of them. I'm gonna skip this part. Okay. So from this paper, we also know that incumbency status predicts list position. It implies the uneven playing field exists among candidates. And this is, we believe, in contradiction with the premise of democracy, because in democracy, we believe that all candidates should have the same chance of winning. But we know from this research that some candidates who are located earlier on the ballot tend to have higher likelihood to get elected. So that implies the uneven playing field among candidates. Of the 43 incumbent female DPR members who were re-elected in 2019, 86% were placed in position 1 to 3 on the ballot paper. 65% women incumbents enjoy being listed at the number 1 position on the ballot compared to 83% of male incumbents. And lastly, half of the elected female candidates, 48% were listed first on the ballot, 24% were placed second, and 13% were listed third. So in other words, 85% of the 120 elected female legislators were those listed in the top 3 ballot positions. So you can imagine the benefit the candidates got by being in the top list position. This is predictive margins of incumbency. So the y-axis is the rate of elections of candidate, and then the x-axis is their party list number. There are some key points. An incumbent position earlier up the party list has almost twice the probability of election than a non-incumbent. So you can tell from this graph that the red color is for the incumbent, it's almost double compared to non-incumbent. And then the second key point, the probability of getting elected drastically falls as a candidate's party list number shift downwards from position 1 to 3. So as you can see here, from 1 to 2, and then from 2 to 3, it falls drastically, but remains relatively stagnant for candidates in the list position of 4 to 10, with the effect being the same for both incumbents and non-incumbents. So basically in Indonesia, if you are placed between 4 up to 10, chances are you're not going to get elected, because it has no difference whatsoever actually with regard to your chance of winning. Okay, I'm just gonna continue. I'm gonna skip this part. This is the first main regression results. This is the result we pull together all the candidates, so we don't restrict this result to women only. I'm going to show you another regression table for women candidates only. This is for men and women. There are some key points. So holding every other variable constant, the lower down the party list a candidate's list is positioned, the less probability.
One more minute, Okta.
Sure. The less probability they have of getting elected. So as you can see here, in the party list number, it's a negative for all models, meaning that the lower you are down the list, the smaller chance of you to get elected. We interpret our finding in terms of odd ratio, and we use percentage in order to make a meaningful interpretation. So for every fall in list position, the probability for that candidate success decreases by 57% for model 1 and 56.7% for model 2. Candidates who were either member of parliament in previous term or current members of local parliament in model 1 were 456% more likely of being elected compared to non-incumbent. Meanwhile, in model 2, if we restrict only to former member of anggota DPR RI, they were having higher likelihood of getting elected, which is around 519% more likely to be elected compared to non-incumbent. The fourth point, when we remove incumbency as a variable from our regression equation, gender becomes statistically significant predictor to the probability of a candidate's electoral success at the 90% confidence interval. So being female actually decrease your chance of winning only if we remove the incumbent variables. And lastly, the proportions of Muslim negatively associated with elections. This finding provides partial evidence on the prevailing argument that Islam is not a main predictor of candidates' political success in Indonesia. I only have 2 slides. I'm going to skip this one. And this is the result when we restrict only to female candidates. when we restrict the dataset to women only, party list number remains a strong predictor of the probability of electoral success. In model 4, for every position further down the party list, the probability that a female candidate is elected decreases by around 54% and 56% for model 5. Incumbency has a slightly stronger effect in model 4 and 5 in comparison to those in previous regression, with female candidates who were either parliamentarians in previous term or current member of local level parliament being 600% more likely to be elected than non-incumbent. And lastly, female candidates who were parliamentarian previous term were 500% more likely to be elected than non-incumbents. This is the last slide, implications and conclusion of our research. Greater benefits from earliest position create an unequal playing field for candidates in PR system elections such as Indonesia. Calling for a fairer ballot arrangement might be needed. For instance, list position based on alphabetical order or randomized position, or we could alter the sequence of candidate based on gender. And then the second implications and conclusion, although the number of elected women reached a record high in the 2019 election, we knew the questions about the quality and qualification arise from there. And then the third point, gender quota affects the chance of women candidates in getting elected, but we know from the Indonesian experience, its efficacy also depends on the arrangement and also enforcement of such quota. And lastly, the importance of ballot structures in women candidates research has been rarely discussed, albeit this factor has been discussed greatly in comparative research of candidates' electability in PR system elections. So that's it from me. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Okta, and thank you very much for all the speakers. Let's give them a virtual applause to all of them. So before moving to the question and answer session, let me give my brief note. First, from the first speaker, I think the paper is well written, and the paper presents two types of discourse for me. One is the colonial discourse, and the second is decolonizing or anti-colonial discourse about women in Malaysia. So I think it needs to be a good historian to assess which one is more correct, say, on the ground. But my question is, from the authors argue that the colonial discourse provide, say, distorted image of women. Women are politically weak or politically inactive, and etc. And now we develop decolonizing perspective. The question is on what ground that we should develop decolonizing perspective. If we believe that, okay, women is not as weak or is not as politically inactive as colonial depicted. Now, if I read the paper, actually the women political activists, what they proposed at that time is also to something like empower women, to strengthen women political activities, which somehow I think somehow confirm the image provided by the colonial interest. So I think that's something that writers on colonial and decolonizing paper, I think, could address and make the point better. The second paper by Saemah, it is also very informative about the historical development of women and politics in Pakistan. But I think it would be much better to highlight certain points of interest. So, for example, you indicated somehow that there has been a new development within Pakistan political system, in which the election committee was authorized to cancel election when the women are not well represented. The question is, what caused this new movement, and the extent to which the movement will have been accepted across the country and will make significant progress in the Pakistan political development. Another point, I think, is that you make a distinction between what we might call an Islamic as an Islamic. What is actually in the basis to call something Islamic and un-Islamic? For example, whether we have some measures to call this is Islamic and this is un-Islamic. You mentioned that women during the Prophet's time, women are equal. There has been a move for equality between women and men during at that time. But the question is whether actually the what we call as equality at this time will be similar with the equality at that time. That's I think that's a question. We might also ask something like whether there is Islamic values and Muslim values. If you call about Islamic values, and I suppose it will be at the say the Islamic teaching and principle. And I don't know whether actually Muslim will achieve that values, and how is the difference between what you call an Islamic value and Muslim values. That's, I think, if you can highlight this point, your paper can be much improved. For the third paper by Qamar, you provide very interesting distinction between the traditionalist and non-traditionalist, and you highlight the concept of the group threat. My question is, what is the origin of the group threat? If women movement, feminist movement, non-traditionalist movement especially, I believe that what they campaign is good for women, that they have control over their body, that they have more space in the public. Why is it threatening for the other woman? Is it the woman, or what is actually makes this group of people feel threatened by this movement? That's the first thing. The second point is that, well, it is good to describe these two types of discourses. I think people will ask which one is dominant and the extent to which the new movement for the non-traditionalists will be able to gain influence in society. And finally, to Okta, this is also a very good paper. I'm very interested in seeing the final output of the paper. So I have just two simple comments, Okta. One is about the estimation. I think it's difficult to find the weakness in the estimation, but one question is your estimation focuses on individual candidates. While in terms of the culture on the society, you will see differences in gender equality, say, index across different dapil, electoral districts. So my question is whether the regional variation contribute to something in the chance of women being elected. That's my first question. The second point is that you mentioned two things: incumbency and the list position. But actually, it is the list position which matters most. In order to go on the top list, it is the incumbent will have the greater chance. So now, what is actually the more effective way to be listed on the top? You can put your discussion, for example, in the debate on the differences in the electoral system between open list and closed list. So some people suggest that, okay, let's go to the open list. So women, even though they are listed on the say on number 5 or number 7, they can have a chance to be elected if they can get more vote. But no, you find actually that's not the case. Actually, list still matters. So if list still matters, what is actually the good and the better way to achieve the, say, women representation? Whether we should go with the open list as we have now in Indonesia, also, or actually we should go with the closed list, by which party institutionalization can be more developed. Thank you, Okta, and thank you for all the presenters. You can respond. I think we start from the first presenter, Ms. Asyiqah or Ms. Hana. And as we have tight time, please be brief, and we can have question and answer from the audience. Thank you.
Hello, salam.
Yes.
Assalamualaikum. I'm Dr. Hana, so I'll be answering the question part. So what do you mean? Candidates in terms, because we don't have presidency here, we have the king. So this is actually outside of the scope of the research, but I will answer. We don't have presidency, but we do have minister, which is a woman. We actually have in 2018 a female deputy prime minister, Dr. Wan Aziza, and she is not an elite. She's just a regular doctor that married to Anwar Ibrahim, and later on she got involved in politics after her husband was I can say was sacked from the government. So I don't really I don't really understand when you say women are not nominated because nominees as candidate, because since Tunku Abdul Rahman time, our first prime minister, in 1969 we already have women in ministry, and we actually have a lot of women minister. So I think you need to read more about our political affairs. And then when you say there is obstacle and patriarchy culture, of course I'm not saying that there is not, but as I myself is an UMNO member, I've never been subject to this patriarchy. And we have a very strong women wing in the terms that we can vote for our, if we do not have a woman support, the woman wing support, you cannot lead UMNO or the so it's not and even in past our very conservative Islamic party also have women wing. So they are very active women inside all this party. It's just that it's just, and they also sometimes become minister. So both opposition, government, and the Conservative Party, we have a woman minister, and women are very active. Government, we have our own woman ministry, which was is led by currently led by Rina Harun. So I do not see. I think and also in terms of our female students are actually more in our university than our male students. There's 70% female student in Malaysia University. So so in terms of being on top politically, economically, Malaysian women are educationally we are actually exceeding our male peers. So there is and Dr. Sirojuddin just now commented about the colonial interest. So actually, because we skip, because there's no time, so I want to explain. During the nationalist movement, the colonial have to choose between two. Whether if they do not choose UMNO, doesn't mean that they like UMNO, because UMNO is more cooperative towards them. If they don't choose UMNO, they will have to face the radical Malays.
Okay. Thank you, Ms.
Which is PKM.
Okay.
Okay, that's all.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Asyiq. As Ms. Saemah is now, he is having some connection problem. Now I'll turn to Mr. Qamar. Please be brief, Mr. Qamar, as we are running out of time. Thank you.
If I'm not wrong, your question was what actually threatens the non-traditionalists?
Yes.
I think the same one.
Yes.
So the group threats of non-traditionalists, according to my research, are freedom of women, her decision making, her presence in the public in political participation, and when she comes into the public space, they face separation, they face harassment, they face barriers from religious patriarchy and patriarchy of men-dominated society. When these perceived threats of individual women translate into group like non-traditionalist, that become a anti-traditionalist group. These are the individual perceived threats, like they are harassed in workplace, in different jobs. They are harassed, they are stereotyped bad character women and when they come into the politics, they come into the media, they come into the business, they come into the education system, they come into power. When they come into power, they are prominent in public space, they face different stereotypes, different like uh, bad characters or immoral women, or like this one from the traditionalists. To counter these stereotypes, they feel they are threatened, their identity is threatened, their character is threatened, their as a woman identity is under threat. So they become more anti-traditionalist, and they participate more in the non-traditionalist group. That is these are the perceived threats of non-traditionalist groups. They also include men and women also.
Okay, thank you, Qamar. Now let's me turn to Okta. Your turn, Okta.
I think I'm gonna address your second comments, Mas. What is the better way to achieve the number of women representation through electoral system? I think many research has shown that if you compare closed list system and open list system, many research has shown that closed list system tends to be more superior than open list system in creating more conducive situation for women candidates. Yeah. And this is partly because the ability of the closed list system to eliminate the possible bias against a woman, because voters don't know who is on the top list, right? But it also depends, of course, on the willingness of party elites to put women in the early list. Yeah? So they got more chance to be elected because of the top list positions. And other research I know also show about the importance of electoral institutions such as higher district magnitude or party magnitude, higher party magnitude. That's going to be more favorable for women as well. And also the design of the gender quota itself, it's also very important. So for example, whether or not there are sanctions against non-compliance, for instance, to any party who fail to comply with this gender quota policy. Is there any placement mandate, for instance, such as what we did in Indonesia? For every three list positions, there should be at least one woman, and that might increase the chance of women to get elected as well. And then for the first question, is there any regional variations in our paper? I know this is a very interesting thing to do as well, but again, as you mentioned, because this is an individual level data, it's quite hard actually to do that unless we match this data with, I don't know, district or provincial level data, and we might have some variations or some insight about that, probably for the next project. Mas Sirojuddin.
Okay, thank you, Okta. Okay, we are running out of time, but as I have an open much question from the audience, if you have question, please raise your hand. We might extend to, I hope you wouldn't mind to extend to 5 more minutes. Is there any, if you have question, please raise your hand. Okay, if no, I think Saemah is joining us. Saemah, if you have something to say in response to my comment, screen is yours, Saemah.
Yeah, thank you, Professor, for your comments. I think, yeah, I need to work on my paper. Yes, of course. So, well, as you asked me, what is the difference between the Islamic culture that is taking place? What I mean by that is what our Mr. Qamar has denoted to the different type of the culture that is being implemented in the Islamic State, that is being swept out by the Western ideologies, like women coming on the road and saying my body, so mera jism meri marzi, my body and my view. So yeah, so what I mean with that is, so because of this un-Islamic political culture that is taking place in the atmosphere, it is discouraged by the Muslims itself. They deny their daughters, their wives, their female counterparts to go and to go into the field of politics. So that's what I mean by the un-Islamic political culture. Yeah, that's all. And for other comments, yeah, thank you so much. I will be improving that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Saemah. And once again, thank you for all the speakers and participants. Let's give our speakers a virtual applause. And before we close the session, we do hope that you wouldn't mind to open your, to switch on your camera. Let's have a group picture together before we close the session. Okay, open your camera, please. 1, 2, 3. Let's take one more. 1, 2, 3. Okay, once again, thank you very much. See you in the next session, and we'll have another session will be start in the next 10 minutes. See you. Bye-bye. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Have
you,
a good day.
everyone.